Home Life. It's Home Plus Life Podcast.
Hey.
Welcome back. Welcome to the new year.
Yeah, happy 2024, people.
Yeah, we're in. I think we're into our second episode of the new year, but our first recording session of the new year. Mm-hmm. So welcome everyone to 2024. Welcome to the Home Life Podcast in 2024. If you're just joining us for the first time, welcome, first and foremost. I'm one of your hosts, JH.
And I'm Sion.
Yeah. And we thought, with the housing crisis, of housing affordability, this is mental. It's everywhere. It's been everywhere for years. It's in the press and everything like that. And we thought it'd be a great way to start off the new year talking about Australia's most affordable places to buy. Mm-hmm. And so, realestate.com.au released a list of 100 suburbs. We're not going to go through all of them, but there's some really, really cool stuff.
That's nationwide, not just one particular.
But in fact, the headline they ran with, which was pretty cool, I thought, home for $130,000. I mean, that hasn't been the case since the 90s. Yeah. At least not in metro areas.
I know a lot of people are going, yeah, but how far away from anything are we?
And look, we'll talk about that as well, and we'll dive in. But look, I think talking about affordability, talking about house prices in general, I think, there's never a better time to get a free house price report and to know exactly what your home is worth in the current market, particularly the market we've had over the last few years. It has been crazy. So it's a really good way to just know where you stand, know what is happening in your area and around you, what properties are selling for, what yours might sell for, and just arm you with the information you need to make the best selling decision or staying decision possible for you and your family. So, of course, Check My House Price is a sponsor of the podcast. So checkmyhouseprice.com.au or checkmyhouseprice.co.nz for our New Zealand listeners across the ditch, as they say. Don't let my Australian accent fool you. I've got Kiwi parents, even though I'm Australian born. So I'm a cross Tasmanite.
But one thing that you do have to know is knowledge is power, especially in the housing market. Yeah. So the more information you have at your tiny little fingertips, the better you are when it comes to making decisions.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think that's probably the theme of the next few years in our housing market, our real estate market. And I just realized that I didn't hit record. So we need to hit record on the cameras. So that's on me, but we'll get the rest of this. There may not be a full video episode of this up and about, but that's all right.
Or we could just start again.
No, we'll just keep rolling.
We'll keep rolling.
Yeah. One take, #1 take. I'm calculating. I don't do 2 takes.
And you make do fun 2 of takes.
I
of
don't
not
do
pressing the right buttons. Well, you know what? At least I get them fluffed up, but I can't say that I don't forget.
I've spent too much time around you, and your non-button pushing ways have rubbed off on me. Yeah,
I press buttons. They're just not in the right order.
You got the buttons right today. I didn't.
I got the record button right.
Yeah,
you did the other one.
Yeah, but that's the long intro. We're now swapped to a short intro anyway. But yeah, so housing affordability. Always a hot topic. Let's talk about the most affordable suburbs, but let's talk the top 10 for houses specifically. And
so are we talking about the affordability or are we talking about the cheapest suburbs?
We'll start with the most affordable suburbs nationally, the top 10.
Yeah, okay.
Number 1's over in WA, which is not really a surprise. Like it could have gone many different ways. It could have been WA, it could have been Northern Territory, but it's over in WA and it's Rangeway, WA, which is, if you look up Rangeway on on Google Maps, it's an outer-lying sort of western suburb of Geraldton. And Geraldton is actually kind of like, it's a metro area, it's a bit of a port on the West Australian coast. From memory, I have been to Geraldton. We drove, when we first came back to Australia, we drove from Perth all the way up and around, and we went Perth to Geraldton. Was one of our first legs and first stops. And from memory, it's a port town that's built on the coast there, so you're pretty close to everything. It's not huge, but there's enough there that it's like I wouldn't. So it's definitely not a one-street town. Like it's
kind of like what is it? Devonport and what's the other one?
Yeah, Burnie down in Tassie, or You know, it's probably
Newcastle? Not
no,
that
Newey's big comparatively.
Right.
It'd be kind of more along the lines of like a Harvey Bay, but maybe a little bit smaller than a Harvey Bay. But that kind of
Harvey Bay isn't that big.
No, I know, but it's a little bit smaller than a Harvey Bay. But it's not like Agnes Waters,
Okay.
right? It's not like a tiny little seaside town.
Yeah.
Right, there is business, there is industry there, and that, and yeah. So like this Rangeway, $174,000.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And is that near beach? Is that...
No, that's back from the beach and that sort of thing. Like looking at it on the map, I mean, it's not that far. Like obviously, Geraldton's not all that big.
I can't really see. You sort of whipped it. I was just... Okay, so it's like the equivalent of, let's say, I suppose, Morayfield from... in Queensland?
No, Morayfield is a lot further away from the coast. Like it's a lot closer to the coast than Morayfield.
Yeah.
So in Queensland. So look, it's you're probably 5 minutes from the beach by car.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest. So it like that kind of price, you know, there's properties that are selling at that kind of price in that area. Tell you what, you could do worse.
You could.
You could definitely do worse.
I mean, I am looking at these ones that you are talking about, and they tend to be just so that people are going, oh my God, like, cool, let's do this. A lot of these cheaper suburbs are in smaller regional areas.
Yes, they are.
These are so. Please
we
understand.
have a list of the ones that are
We are not
metros.
saying that. I think I've got them here.
Have you got the metro ones?
Metro suburbs.
Yep, you've got the metro. Yep. There we go.
He just so that you guys are going like who
I've
are
got
in WA
capital
going
city suburbs
that's
too.
nowhere near it. Like we understand this is cheapest suburbs in regional areas, but then we do also have like I've got a metro one here. And I do apologise for people over in WA because I have heard people from WA say two different ones of saying this is Mandurah, but then I have also heard people say Mandurah. So I don't know. I don't know.
When I saw Mandurah on the list, I reached out to Bo Bremer, who's an agent and a mate of ours in Mandurah. He sells in Mandurah. And I sort of said to him, I said, how far away from Perth is Mandurah? And he said, it's about 60 k's from Perth City, like the CBD.
So it's not that far.
So it's not all that far. You know, and he gave me a quick single sentence, like just on Messenger, throwaway line. He goes, it's a great little beachside suburb, plenty going for it.
Yeah. So they've got price, the median sale price as being $390.
Yeah, and so this is a metro suburb, by the way. So
yeah,
we've got two lists that we're bouncing off here. We've got one that's just the most affordable.
Well, the reason why I'm saying,
and then we're also
you're
looking
talking
at metro
about WA. So that's the reason why I was just pointing out that we understand that this could be more of your regional areas that JH is talking about, and I've just started going with the WA theme a little bit closer to metro areas.
Yeah.
Mandurah, Armadale.
And particularly, like if you're working in the gig economy, if you're working digitally, like even if you're a tradie, you know, there's these kind of areas like Geraldton's got a reasonable population, but these kind of areas are great areas to start and to build up from.
Yeah.
And to get into the property market.
Sometimes if you're just wanting a seascape or a treescape, because we've got Bowie here, so Bow Desert in Queensland is $565.
One of the things that I have always daydreamed about is finding a little sleepy seaside town that no one's realised yet that's still dirt cheap, buying and just setting up.
So essentially what I'm hearing here is potentially you want our children to kind of be like round the twist kids.
I think it's too late for that. I think they're already round the twist. Yeah, I mean, they've been raised by us. But look, jumping into like there's Mount Morgan in Queensland's at 177, so that's central Queensland. That's it looks a couple of hours inland from Gladstone, Gladstone.
Yeah.
There, so and there's a mine there. So obviously that's something that's cropped up around a mine, a rural plus mining combined area. You got Blackwater in Queensland as well. Look, I've never been to Blackwater. We did a little bit of a hunt, but there doesn't seem to be much there. But that's central Queensland, 207,000.
Look, Blackwater, and it, like, if you're wanting that sleepy kind of town way of living, and a lot of people are going that way, considering that, now NBN is starting to be getting momentum with, regional areas now, that, when it comes to people working away and coming back into the city, I think we're starting to go back to what it was like in the 1960s and 70s, where it was like dad would come home for the weekend. Meanwhile, he's out, working, comes home for the weekends, goes back out. So they come home to the regional areas where mum and the kids
and
are.
We talked about that council too a little while back that had developed their own land and they were close on the railway.
It was only last month.
It was last month, but it was like a two-hour train ride in to Melbourne, right? And people were quite happy to make it. And obviously, to get
I feel
in the
that
property
Blackwater's
market.
a little bit further
I think
out.
Blackwater's a little bit further.
But one that I did see is Toogoolawah. Now, I'm surprised that Toogoolawah isn't on this list.
Well,
because
Toogoolawah's at a median of 402,000. That's why it's not on this list. Because this list tops out. So Longreach is at 241.
Right.
Right. So you're talking different, like, this is capital city
because
suburbs.
It's saying Ipswich, but I've been to Toogoolawah and it's not very. It may be in the
Ipswich Council, but it's out there. Yeah,
but it is. I feel it would be closer to drive to Toowoomba.
You know the one that sparked my interest on this list, talking about the suburbs nationally and the sort of more rural and out there suburbs, was Port Augusta in South Australia. Like it's about three and a half hours out of Adelaide, 300 k's or something out of Adelaide by road. But it's right up in that sort of cove between two peninsulas, I guess.
Yeah.
And then there must be a river that comes up through it. And I just looked at that and I went, you've got so much water. And I mean, for me, being close to water is amazing. It's a relatively decent sized town. Like searching it and look, prelim, very early day research, looking on Google Maps and things like that. It seemed to have a lot there.
So,
for what is supposedly a rural town, where the median price is 217,000.
Well, do you want to know the crazy thing? And this is something that I had heard many people say, and they're like, do you know what the best thing is about South Australia? The road coming out of it. Now, don't get me wrong, South Australia people, I love Adelaide. So please understand why, I'm quite happy for people to think that. And to keep that kind of price happening down there. Like, I'm quite happy.
Well, a lot of people say that about Tassie, right? Like, they talk about how the
but
best...
they've got a moat and they're not afraid to use it.
Exactly. And I love that. I don't know. For me, these areas appeal because they're a different pace.
Yeah.
And I think that's what me personally, and I'm speaking emotionally here, I'm not speaking from a spreadsheet investment advice point of view because I don't have those qualifications. But speaking personally... it's what appeals to me about Tasmania, what appeals to me about places like Port Augusta, is they appear, at least on the surface and at a cursory glance and a cursory visit, to be the kind of places where you work to live, not live to work.
Yes. And
that really, really appeals. But let's jump across. There's a couple of spots in Tassie. I was actually surprised. There's a outlying suburb of Hobart that made the list of the top 10 most affordable capital city suburbs. And Gagebrook in Tassie has a median price, and it's just looking at the maps and that we've been in this area. It's probably 25 minutes out of Hobart. So for someone from the mainland, like 25 minutes that's nothing travel time. Right, particularly if you've been East Coast, Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney. If you're driving into work and that, 25 minutes, we're all used to that. 373,000.
Yeah,
and it's got some views.
Well, look, I'm going to say something a bit scandalous here. The one thing that I do know is Wakely. Is that what it is in Launceston?
Waverley.
Waverley.
Is it Waverley? I'll look it up. Go on with the story.
I can tell you right now, some of the views that you have from that place, that suburb, is quite amazing. However, let's just say that a lot of people would prefer not to live there. So I know that there's people probably locally to these areas going, yeah, there's a reason why it's so cheap.
Yeah, because it's next to Ravenswood, and we keep getting told Ravenswood is an interesting area because it's near the prison or something to that effect. Am I remembering that correctly? Is that what we were told by our mate who was a former police officer down there?
I didn't think that there was a prison there.
I
know that Risdon is the...
Risdon's the prison. Sorry, Risdon's the prison.
Yeah, but there's Risdon and then there's Risdon Vale, and I get the two confused.
Yeah, so Ravenswood was an area we were told by people who live down in Lonnie that you kind of... It's not the best. And it's a higher crime rate. That's what we were told. Higher investor rental area as opposed to owner-occupier. Yep.
So that's the reason why I'm saying here that if there's locals going, there's a reason why that's so cheap.
It's so, and that's part of the research.
At the same time, if you're looking to invest as opposed to owner-occupy, then, maybe these things are definitely for you. I do know, like Bow Desert, I know back in the day Bow Desert did have a pretty bad name, but it's actually getting a lot better.
It is, and there's a cycle to these things.
$565 is the median price.
There's a cycle to these things, and this is...
Isn't it normally 20 years?
It depends on the last 10 years has thrown our property market into all sorts of chaos, but... Essentially what happens, you end up with an area that becomes essentially a low socioeconomic, housing prices are cheap and that sort of thing. There's a lot more investors, properties aren't looked after as well, higher crime rate, all that sort of stuff. And what will often happen is over a period of time, the price of the properties that are there starts to attract first home buyers, starts to attract renovators, starts to attract people who, for lack of a better term, gentrify the area. They start to bring it up. They start to beautify it.
It's because it's cheaper. So people go in there, first home buyers, we're going to renovate, we're going to sell.
Yeah. We can get into the property market. We can pay it off quickly and we can then rent it out and use it as equity. Like there's all sorts of forces that lead to this starting to change, right? And so once the first home buyers and the renovators and that have started to bring it up, often you'll find during that process there's expansions, there's, people increase size, all that sort of stuff. And then you get your second families coming in. And it starts to build up and increase the value of the property, and suddenly it becomes sought after. Because at the same time that's happening, urban sprawl is happening with population growth. And this happens on the mainland all the time. There is one suburb that I have seen in 15 years of real estate and running the numbers and that, and I stress that I've seen, there's probably more than one suburb nationwide, but there's one that I have seen and had experience with that has not really yet had that effect.
Yeah.
And it's been and maintained the same reputation for 30 plus years. Yeah. And that's Eagleby.
Yeah.
Right? Eagleby, yes, the property values have increased, but they've never seen that gentrification, that beautification, that sudden, they've just increased with the market. There hasn't been that sudden change.
It's ridden the coattails of surrounding suburbs as opposed to being its own.
But it's in terms of its demographics and that, it hasn't changed a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
So it's still heavily investor, heavily rental, crime rate, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So
maybe it's because it's hiding behind a hill.
Look, it could be that. It could be that it's kind of stuck on one side of the highway where there's not much else there other than that. I'm not sure, but it's sort of bucked the trend of that. But if you can pick that part of the cycle, you can find value, build value, increase equity, and so forth. And often that's what a lot of people do. They come in at that point where that suburb's about to shift, and sometimes that's out of necessity. They can only afford to buy in that area. But they buy in that area and they kind of turn a blind eye a little bit to the negatives of it because the benefits of it and what they can see in the potential in the future, they can see, they go, you know what, it's worth it. We're going to cop this. And then they reap the benefits 5, 10, 15 years later. Interestingly, Herdsman's Cove is next door to Gagebrook. and a quick look and a look at some of the properties.
I like how you say this as though I know.
This is in Tassie. There's some water views in those suburbs too. There's some pretty amazing views.
Quite honestly, there's really not a lot of places in Tasmania where you're near the water, like suburb near the water, that you wouldn't actually have.
Yeah, Tassie's pretty view rich.
Yeah.
But you've also got, so obviously Mandurah's on this list, most affordable capital city suburbs as well. It's on your list over there. And we've talked about
the
Mandurah.
other one
Reach out to Bo Bremner, by the way, from Team Bremner Property. And just if you're after something, he'll be able to find you something there. Mandurah's, I like Mandurah. I've done a little bit of study. I've worked with Bo a little bit.
Do you know what? I've never been to, well, now I haven't ever been to WA or Northern Territory.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, we've got to change that at some point. Elizabeth North in Adelaide.
Never heard of it.
Look, it's one of those suburbs, because of course we've got a couple of mates down there, and we go and visit, and they talk about Elizabeth in the same.
Smidge is down there. Of course, we have to go down there.
But Elizabeth is considered again that area that is more investor than owner occupier. That's that area that people who know the area kind of try to avoid or don't really necessarily want to be there for all of the reasons.
Or buying there.
Or buying there. You know, there's the innuendo is the crime rate and so forth is there. But at $368,000 as a median house price, I'm not surprised that this is sitting on this top 10 most affordable, and I wouldn't be surprised if that area saw decent growth over the next couple of years and started to see that beautification.
Look, I think now is starting, especially now that, you know, the world has morphed into, you know, online. So if you're quite happy to wait a couple of weeks or to send something back to get another size or whatever, you just don't have the time to go to the shops. And, you know, now that there's places that you can work from home that are more of your hybrid kind of work, you know, all of that sort of stuff, these types of, you know, potential living, providing that you can go and do your research. So, you know, go and check out what your local schools are like. Go and check out even the other good way is to have a look as to the retirement area. If you find, because there's one place, you know, we live in the Redlands, and the Redlands does have quite a few different retirement villages, you know, especially Victoria Point. That seems to be the hub for it. But also have a look to see as to what the future development is going to be. So is there going to be your shopping centres that are being put in? Is there going to be, you know, a transport hub? So, you know, bus stations, train stations, all of those types of things. Go and have a look, do your research into each place so that when it does come to investing, if you're investing and you're just going, okay, we're going to live here for a couple of years just so that we can get into the housing market so that we can go somewhere else, check out those things, because there could be, by the time that you go to sell, you may turn around and go, you know what, all of this development is actually happening. Why do we really want to leave?
You know what, it's funny you mentioned that. So Mandurah's number 5 on the list. Number 6 on the list is another Western Australian suburb called Medina. And that is actually a hell of a lot closer to Perth. Like it's between Perth and Rockingham, having a look on it. So, you know, you're probably 15, 20 minutes outside of Perth as opposed to probably an hour for Mandurah or 45 minutes. And that's at $389 on my list.
But also have a look as to what, like, other suburbs that are around, do they have those types of shopping hubs? Because if you don't necessarily, like, how many people these days, like, I can't even tell you the last time that I went into Brisbane City to actually do something out of necessity.
It's a lifestyle, and there's different people with different lifestyles. Yeah, I know that,
but at the same time, majority of people, even a lot of people I know, they'll avoid the CBD as much as they possibly can.
The traffic's a nightmare.
Well, not just because of the traffic, it's because everything that's offered in the CBD is now offered anywhere else that's like closer.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Look, there are a lot of options out there, and it's interesting going through this list and this most affordable list, because in years past, the most affordable list has really not been great. Like, you kind of looked at those suburbs and went, oh, they're still miles out from anywhere.
Well, they go affordable, but still within the main metro area, and you're just like, okay, who can actually afford that?
And some of those suburbs actually, yeah, that's the other thing. Is affordables like where is it? One of these lists here, I looked at it and they're like, here's the most affordable metro ones.
This one,
and we're talking medium price. So what is it? Most affordable metro suburbs in the Hot 100 list. North Hobart, 834,000.
Oh, Glenmore Park,
1,035,000. And then I get that, you know, if you are buying a house and you're selling one to buy a house, that probably is affordable for a lot of people, because you've obviously done well and you've created equity and so forth. But if you're a first home buyer looking for an affordable suburb,
going, oh, that's cute.
There's like, for a lot of first home buyers, $1 million is out of reach.
Well, if you have parents that won't go guarantor for you,
yeah,
like, you got to have that saving there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's the average age now of a first home buyer?
I haven't checked it in a while, but last time I checked it was 34. I think it's actually increasing though. Like, my gut would tell me it's increasing, but I haven't looked at it in a while.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we were at 36 now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So therefore, that means that people who are younger,
it creates that opportunity too.
Sort of a little bit more of the freak of nature when it comes to the real estate.
Not so much. I think, you know,
I'm talking about averages.
The averages, but props to the younger generation as well, because those who do have that housing goal and that ownership goal, they're very, very focused.
Yes.
And they're achieving it. I think we're going to see that age start to level out, like that average first age. And we're going to see a lot more stories of younger people that are coming through. But one of the things that is clear is when you read these stories, often they start small. And they start in one of these suburbs, and then they build up and they build on top of it.
Yes, because what they do is they go, I'm going to live at home with mum and dad. I'm going to have this, you know, investment property that I'm going to get someone to move into while I'm paying this off. And then at the same time, so they're doing their little saving and putting away and, you know, doing it that way. And then they go, hold on, instead of me going and selling that, I'm actually going to borrow against it so that I can go and buy somewhere else that's within that area. And then they start up a little portfolio, and then they go, all right, now it's time for me to go and settle down and buy somewhere. And sure, instead of mum and dad going guarantor for them, they're doing the whole, you know, we're helping you to become financially independent by allowing you to stay here as opposed to going guarantor. So you're doing this all by yourself, essentially, and we're just helping out where we can. So, you know, like, there are ways around it. It's just, I think the way that our whole brains work when it comes to what was, where it was, you got married, you bought a house.
Oh, the world is changing.
Kids.
The expectation
Whereas
is
now
changing.
it's stay at home with mum and dad, get a job, invest in a place like this so that you've got someone in there helping you pay off as you're, and then eventually go, all right, do I sell this place or do I reinvest?
Look, and to be fair, there was a lot of that when you and I were coming through our late teens and early 20s.
Yeah, but
the issue is the issue is in yours and my experience is that we couldn't stand living at home. If we could have stayed living at home, we probably would have done things a lot differently, but we couldn't handle it. We couldn't.
I could have done it.
I couldn't have.
I had to do it.
Best birthday present I ever got was 2 weeks rent for my 18th birthday.
Well, I had to do it because I was actually paying week to week for my study. So that's where I invested my money, was in me. Funny thing, don't actually do anything to do within that field now. But I think if you've got a younger person within your household that is working, that doing this type of thing and getting them to save up and then doing it, like my little cousin did it. That's how Lukey did his thing. Amazing tattoo artist down in Sydney, if you're looking for one. He did that. He worked his butt off. He went and invested in his own, property, and his parents helped out with, supporting him while he saved. Has an awesome place in, I forget where it is exactly. It's not metro, but it's still within, I think, Greater Sydney area.
Yeah. No, he's done really, really well.
Yeah.
But just quickly, there's one more thing I want to touch on. So we'll recap the top 10 lists here, and then I want to handle some social media comments, or one particular comment on TikTok. It's awesome. It was an angry comment, but it was also awesome because, shout out even to the trolls because they helped the algorithm. But it's also a thought that I suspect a lot of people would be having, and the point that they raise is a good one to raise and discuss. So we'll jump into that in a sec. But let's recap. So the top 10 most affordable suburbs nationally for houses. You've got Rangeway, WA in number 1, Mount Morgan in Queensland, number 2, Blackwater in Queensland, number 3, Whyalla Norrie in South Australia, number 4, Port Augusta, South Australia, number 5, Whyalla Stewart, South Australia, number 6, Cobar, New South Wales, number 7, Spalding, WA, number 8, Ingham, Queensland, and Longreach, Queensland, rounding out the top 10. And then the top 10 most affordable capital city suburbs for houses, Elizabeth North, South Australia, Malden, Northern Territory, and Darwin, Gagebrook, Tasmania, Hobart, Grey, Northern Territory, Darwin, Mandurah, WA, so that's obviously Mandurah, Medina, WA, Perth, Southwest, Herdsman's Cove, Tasmania, Hobart, and that one's at 396. Everything before Herdsman's Cove is under 396 thousand. That is Smithfield Plains, South Australia, Adelaide North, 401. Toogoolawah, Queensland, Ipswich, 402. Though I think that one's in there on a technicality because of how far Toogoolawah is, and Coongamia. Hopefully, I haven't offended anyone with that pronunciation. Western Australia, Perth's northeast at 403,000 median. So they're the top 10 most affordable capital cities and most affordable suburbs, full stop, around the nation. We should probably do an episode on the most expensive and talk about those and daydream what we'd do if we won the US Powerball and had $1 billion.
The US Powerball, of which they take like 75% of it.
Look,
because of taxes.
I would still walk away with 250 million happy, just quietly. 250 million US, I might add too. So
this is true.
That's about 375 million Australian. I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, this is true.
All right. So comment on episode 33. So episode 33, it was a quick shortcut together of, we were talking about obviously supply and demand, housing crisis and so forth. And Aggravation and Rage is the account name. The profile picture is an upside down Australian flag. So this tells us everything we need to know. But the point that they raised is one that does need to be discussed because on first glance, it appears valid. And the point that they made is analyze dwelling construction and population growth. The rates are matched and have been for 40 years. Your info is BS. That's a fair point. Construction, dwelling, population growth, they've been thereabouts, right? But what this data doesn't show is that over the last 50 years, we've gone from averaging 3.6 people per household to 2.4. So
where's the rest of those people living?
Well, that's it, right? So we have, for the same population, we have an additional 30% demand for houses. Okay. Now, on top of that, remember the episode we talked about there's 1 million houses missing?
Yeah.
Now, we analysed it, went through it, went, it's not truly 1 million, but there's still a significant chunk. So let's look at a few stats. There's foreign investors that have about up to 400,000 houses, 440,000 houses, and there's no records as to how many of them are vacant. Airbnb boasted the highest number of property listings in Australia in the 2023 year, and that was a record year for them, and it was over 80,000 properties. So there's 80,000 properties that are also not in the market. You've then got properties that are held up in probate, properties that are vacant because no one wants to live in them.
Can I just ask?
Hang on. Properties that are undergoing renovation, properties that are currently tied up in legal, and also properties where there's a transition happening. So you have 30% increased demand just internally because we're living in smaller households than what we did before. And yes, the construction rate versus population rate may be thereabouts with spikes in different places, but the demand has increased significantly over that period, and that is the core problem.
Yeah. So the one thing that I want to know is when it comes to the Airbnb, when they've done the stats, is that exclusively like entire place to yourself, or is it inclusive of like granny flats and
I believe it was entire place to
you.
yourself because I believe there's more listings otherwise, but I can't confirm that. I just got 80,000 properties available.
We all know
on Airbnb.
that you can hire a room, but but even still, when you think about it, if you are quite happy to do short leasings where that room is being, why is that not on a roommate kind of deal?
Yeah, and that's it. So, and that's short-term accommodation, right? So that's Airbnb. Keep in mind there's also Stays. There's multiple other apps like that as well. So we can probably...
you normally find that they're across numerous ones.
There would be, but there'd also be ones that are on one and not the other for whatever reason. So keep in mind, so there's about 1% of our property stock, for lack of a better term, is taken up in short-stay accommodation.
Yeah.
We've got 4% taken up by foreign investors, or maximum 4% taken up by foreign investors.
Yeah.
An undisclosed number of which are deliberately left vacant.
Yeah.
We have 10% plus of our properties where the government's like, they're vacant.
Yeah.
For whatever the reasons are, they're vacant. And at the same time, just on one factor alone, which is the size of our households, we have shrunk the size of our household, the number of people living in a household, from 3.6 to 2.4, literally increasing our demand for houses by a third. So the whole construction staying level with population growth, right, that's all well and good, except the population's demand has increased by 30% above what its population growth has.
Yeah.
And that's we need 30% more houses because of the lifestyle changes that have come into play.
Yeah. And I think, like, I get what they're saying, but at the same time, I look at what they're saying and go, you know what? Go and say that to someone who doesn't have anywhere to live. And not out of choice. That's the thing. Not out of choice.
My response was a bit tongue-in-cheek, and I just simply replied and said, and yet we have a housing crisis. The number of people per dwelling has decreased significantly over that time too, so the need for houses has increased at a greater rate than the population too.
Yeah.
With a cheesy grinned face. But look... An account named Aggravation and Rage.
Yeah, I feel is certainly purposely going.
Look, I agree, but look, the point that they raised was one worth discussing.
Yeah.
So shout out to Aggravation and Rage. Thanks for that. Appreciate the input. Even if we don't agree, definitely appreciate the input on TikTok. And look, all your comments do too. Like I welcome the trolls because at the end of the day, it just encourages the algorithm to pump us out there even further and get the message out further. Not just
that, it's the fact that you're giving us topics to talk about too.
Yeah, so absolutely. So jump on our socials.
I'm not saying that we have everyone get really angry at us either.
We've got ex-wives and ex-husbands for that.
Yeah.
I'm at John Hellaby on TikTok. The name is JH, so feel free to follow me on TikTok. I'm at John Hellaby on Instagram. Double checking that actually because I don't think I've ever given out my things on
I don't
the
give
podcast.
out my things because I don't want people to know that.
But yeah, so
you can do my work stuff, which is the check my side of things. Be happy to engage with you there.
I'm at John Hellaby on Instagram, at John Hellaby on Threads. So chuck us a follow, and any of the reels we pump up. If you've got some input, by all means, jump on and give us your thoughts. I'd love to have it.
Both good and bad. We're not delusional.
Look, we don't know everything, right? Like we know enough to be dangerous here. I've done this for 15 years. You've been doing this for 5-6 years. We've seen a fair bit. We've got access to a lot of the data, and obviously our interpretations is going to be coloured by our approach and our experience and where we've come from, as well as personal and professional. your experience is going to be different. And I think one of the beautiful things about social media, there's a lot of negatives to it, but one of the beautiful things is we get to have an open discussion coming from each of our own experiences, and we can bring different data to the table, different points. And I'm always up to be proven wrong. If bring the evidence. Bring evidence from reputable sources. Bring the data.
Bring the evidence.
Bring the
and
evidence.
Don't.
That's the Aspie in me coming out. Bring me the evidence.
Yeah.
I want the data.
Yeah,
Always
exactly.
want the data.
Well, I'm exactly the same. I want to have an educational discussion as opposed to opinions.
And mudslinging.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, when people start to troll and mudsling, I start to poke the bear because then it just becomes bad entertainment for me.
You could also help out anger and aggression. Is that what they were called?
Aggression and rage, I think it was. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. But look, hey, each their own.
Yep.
All is good. All is well.
Yeah.
So, but a shout out to everyone on our socials who's following.
Yep.
It's early days. We're starting out. This is the first time we've mentioned our socials on the podcast. So, jump on, say good day, give us your thoughts. We'll probably do more apps where we're talking about people's comments because that's how this podcast started, was comments on the Check My House Price ads.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, on that note,
peace out, homies.
Peace out. See you around like rissoles.